All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashum, Yahweh Shai, Bahashum, Kodash. I want to give the honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well, and grace and peace to you elect around the four winds, believing and pushing this truth in all sincerity. May the blessing of election be upon your houses. This is your fellow servant, Rakhaya from the GMS Orlando camp, coming at you with another impromptu lesson. And tonight, I wanted to tap into some developments regarding the surveillance technology surrounding the image and the mark of the beast, all right, which is the RFID microchip. All right, because unknowingly, America's already slipped into an automated surveillance society. All right, and this is important to understand moving forward because this is a part of prophecy. All right, and prophetically, the accuser is moving with great haste to set up a case and an accusation against the elect. All right, which we already understand that the elect are already been justified through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Ba'ashim, Yahweh Shai. All right, so these are not things to fear. All right, ultimately, these are just things to understand. All right, because tools like this, all right, such as the GDID, which we're going to get into here in a second, and other software and legislation are going to be used as tools to set up a case and accusation against the elect. All right, and this is important to understand concerning the times that we're entering into. All right, we're entering into the time of persecution, all right, which Yahweh Shai spoke about personally, all right, which we'll get here in Luke 21. And we're going to start at verse 10. It says, Then said he unto them, Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And great earthquakes shall be in diverse places, and famines and pestilences, and fearful sights and great signs shall be there from heaven, which we've been seeing, constantly. All right, we've been seeing these things ramp up, actually, in the planet Earth. All right, they become more frequent. It says, verse 12, But for all these they shall lay their hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues, and into prisons, being brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. All right, so we're coming into this time of persecution to where some of us are going to be offered up into the prisons, all right, brought before judges, magistrates, the kings of Babylon, all right, for the testimony of Yahweh Shai. All right, it's even going to get to a point where the Lord spoke about this in John 16 and verse 2. He says, They shall put you out of the synagogues. Yeah, the time cometh that whosoever killeth you will think that he doeth God service. All right, so we're coming into a time where the prophets are going to be demonized on a whole nother level. All right, we're going to be deemed as domestic terrorists, all right, which we're starting to see that narrative starting to rise in Babylon the Great with those who oppose the small hats, all right, and what they're doing, the plans that they have concerning the Greater Israel Project, and their plans on expanding and conquering our land. We're starting to see that accusation and that narrative starting to arise. Even with the mayor of New York, the elder Yashawama just did a video on it. How the elder, it's like not the elder, but the mayor of New York, all right, is now being labeled as a terrorist, all right, by Trump because of his ideologies against the small hats, And you best believe that that narrative is going to migrate its way over to the prophets, all right, and the testimony of Yahweh Shai, because we hold the greatest and the most powerful testimony in the earth today. Okay, this testimony is what's single-handedly shaking the worlds. All right, the worlds weren't shaken like this since prophecy and the prophets came into the earth. All right, since the late 60s, there's been a great stirring up in the earth, and that has happened through the word of the Lord. All right, the word of the Lord has stirred the times up. It's stirred up the minds of the people and has gotten the time moving. All right, prophecy moving. In a sense, and now these other nations are starting to move to the tune of prophecy. So I also want to get this because I mentioned that America has already slipped into an automated surveillance society. All right, and I typed into ChatGPT, what is automated surveillance? It says automated surveillance is the use of technology to monitor, collect, analyze, and sometimes respond to information about people. Now, we can directly correlate this with the data centers, all right, that are being put up, all right, the onset of companies like Palantir, which are designed to collect and file, store data on people, the American populace. All right, we're starting to see the onset of all these different tools for a reason. All right, it's because Esau is getting ready to make his move concerning his accusations. All right, concerning the persecution of the saints. Okay, all of these moves are being set in place strategically. All right, and the only ones who can't see it are these 2/3 Negroes and a lot of these entry-level camps. A lot of these people who aren't paying attention to prophecy and how the devil is moving. One powerful thing that the Elder Yashawamba, says quite frequently is, you got to listen to the devil speak. The devil will tell on himself. And Esau's done a lot of exposing his own self these past couple of years, man. Especially these past couple of months. Esau's told on himself at an all-time rate. It's gotten to the point, where his own counsel is starting to fuck him up. This is Job 18 and verse 7. The steps of his strength shall be straightened, and his own counsel shall cast him down. And his own counsel is starting to put him into snares and nets that he can't really get out of. It's really starting to put him into the very snares and nets that he's laid to entrap the Lord's people. He's getting himself into a bind trying to move with this wickedness, man. He's put himself into a bind. And now we're starting to see him trying to get himself out of the bind that he's created, the snare that he's created for Israel, and get himself out of the bind that he's created geopolitically. And so he's caught up on all sides. That's why it says the steps of his strength shall be straightened. All right, the steps of his strength are being straightened right now on all sides. All right, it says up. Let me read up. Verse 5. It says, yeah, the light of the wicked shall be put out, and the spark of his fire shall not shine. The light shall be dark in his tabernacle, and his candle shall be put out with him. Okay? The steps of his strength shall be straightened, and his own counsel shall cast him down. For he is cast into a net by his own feet, and he walketh upon the snare. The jinn shall take him by the heel, and the robber shall prevail against him. The robber being Yahushua. The snare is laid for him in the ground, and the trap for him in the way. Terror shall make him afraid on every side, and shall drive him to his feet. And right now, what we're experiencing and what we're witnessing is Esau Edom being driven to his feet, all right, on all sides, externally and internally. Esau Edom is being driven to his feet, all right. And this is it, all right. He won't be able to stand up after this. Like it says in Jeremiah, there is no balm to heal Babylon. This is Jeremiah 51 and verse 9. Verse 8, it says, Babylon is suddenly fallen and destroyed. Howl for her, take balm for her pain, if so be she may be healed. All right, so I got somebody call me in the middle of me recording, of course. But we're going to pick back up here in Jeremiah 51. In verse 9, it says, we would have healed Babylon, but she is not healed. Forsake her and let us go, every one to his own country. For her judgment reacheth unto heaven and is lifted up even to the skies. All right, and so now we're at that point now where Babylon has a terminal illness, and everyone can see it. That's why, you have a lot of these different foreigners who are returning back to their countries because they see the bleak future that is ahead of America. All right, the windows are darkened for everybody. A lot of these foreigners that came over here for a better future, a brighter future, to make money to send it back into their own country, and create generational wealth. A lot of that has dried up, so a lot of these people are starting to see the writing on the wall for Babylon the Great. All right, that it won't be healed. You would have healed it, but she is not healed. All right, forsake her. All right, now we're starting to see the nations forsaking Babylon. Okay, because there is no healing for Babylon at this point in time. All right, it's over with. Okay, America has contracted the same illness that Antiochus did. All right, the rotting from the inside out. Okay, but it says automated surveillance is the use of technology to monitor, collect, analyze, and sometimes respond to information about people. When we get into that response, all right, that is, that response that is predicated upon the analysts and the data collected upon certain peoples, you get into a scenario, or you find yourself in a scenario like the movie the apostles always reference. I think it's Demolition Man, to where criminals are arrested and charged even before they even do the crime. From the data that's collected and analyzed, on different people, your search history, your view history, what your internet traffic history. All right, from different things that they collect, who you interact with, the spaces that you're in, where you're traveling to. All right, from the data that they collect and analyze, they're trying to make it to where they can put a case, accuse, and indict a criminal before he even does the crime, before the crime is even committed. And that's dangerous territory for the American people, not for the elect, because the elect have already been justified pursuant to Romans the 8th chapter. All right, but for these Babylonians, that's very dangerous territory. All right, that we've quite frankly already have entered into. It says places or activities with little or no human involvement. Instead of a person constantly watching, automated systems use software, sensors, cameras, which we've seen a lot of these flock cameras, all right, catch flack because they've been doing more than just taking pictures of car tags. All right, they've been collecting a lot more data than what the government initially reported that they were collecting. It says, or artificial intelligence to detect patterns, identify events, or flag unusual behavior. Common examples include security cameras with AI, license plate readers such as the flock cameras, retail stores, online platforms, smart home devices, and financial systems. It says how it works. Collects data. Number one, it collects data, video, audio, location, internet activity. 2, it analyzes it using algorithms or AI. And 3, it flags or acts on findings such as sending an alert, recording an event, or blocking suspicious activity. It says the benefits, it operates 24/7. So this is 24/7 surveillance, and this is clocking this as a benefit. All right, so this is 24/7 surveillance. All right, which aligns with what Esau is trying to do with the mark of the beast. All right, because having people under having people chipped would allow him to fully have everyone, on 24/7 surveillance without any hiccups. It says it can process more data than humans, help detect crime, safety hazards, or fraud quickly, and reduces the need for constant human monitoring, which they're going to use crime as a way to slip this past a lot of the eyes and ears of the people, just like they always do. They're going to use safety, peace as a means to implement a lot of these wicked devices. All right, we're not ignorant to Satan's devices. Like it says in 2 Corinthians 2:11, we're not ignorant to how this devil moves. All right, we've received a bird's eye view in the form of prophecy. So we already understand. It says concerns privacy, accuracy, bias, and data security, which you can all read that for yourself. But I'm going to tap into this video, just play a couple of minutes of it. We're going to grab a couple of precepts, and then we'll close it out.
About a scary Microsoft GDID, or the Global Device Identifier. Let this GDID event be a heads-up warning. This newly discovered threat is massively impacting your privacy today. You may not have heard of this new ID, but apparently this has been in existence for a long time, and probably since Windows 10 in 2015. Lately, this has caused a bit of a reaction among Windows users because people, including me, weren't aware of this specific identifier. I'm aware of many other identifiers which are passed to Microsoft the moment you log in with the Microsoft account. But what makes this special is
And the reason why I'm playing this video, the importance behind it is that this technology has already been in effect. So Esau has already developed the software, developed technology, released the technology, and tested the technology. Excuse me. So it's not something that's already, it's in development, they're in the works. All right, this is technology that's already been developed. It's been released and tested already. Okay, and it's now just coming to the light of the people because of this recent, indictment that it helped get on one of these fraud guys or whatever the case may be. But continuing on.
that this identifier is apparently constantly leaked to Microsoft via telemetry, and this is transmitted even if you are logged in using a local account. So basically, this cancels out the expected privacy of a local account. There is no opt out, there is no way to disable this. Just the mere act of turning Windows on will transmit this identifier to Microsoft and constantly during use and track your Windows activities. While the transmission of a unique identifier tied to your specific device is shocking enough, what's worse was the discovery that this identifier ties you to actions on the internet, including websites you visited and tons of other activity telemetry. This tracking of your particular device is independent of your IP address. You can run a VPN, even Tor, and it won't matter. There will be evidence of what you did since your computer itself will squeal to Microsoft.
So what this is basically saying is that there will be no more anonymity concerning the internet. All right, everybody will have an internet ID. All right, everybody will be traced. All right, every interaction, all right, every website, all your search history, all of your data will ultimately be collected and sent to one of these data collection companies. All right, and be processed by one of these data collection companies. Okay, there is no more online anonymity. All right, to where you could slip behind an alias, and perform different works, or slip behind different VPNs, and search up different things and hide your search history. Everything is going to be brought to the forefront for these data collection companies. Okay, and so what this is doing is it's helping he's helping the accuser build a case against the prophets. All right, because everything that we search up, all of our history, okay, all of our talking points, all of the lessons that we make, all of it is being collected. Okay, and all of it is being ultimately going to be used as a form of as a case against us. And it says here in Revelation 12:10, it says, "And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now has come salvation and strength in the kingdom of our power, and the power of his Mashiach. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our power day and night." Okay, because at the end of the day, the accuser, which we'll get that word for accuser, Strong's G 2723, categoreo, which it sounds a lot like category, which is what Esau Edom was trying to put us in. But it says to accuse. It says to make an accusation. It says to charge with some evidence, to charge with some offense. Okay, and the offense that the prophets are going to be charged with more than likely is DT, domestic T. All right, because of our testimony that we carry through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahasham Yahushai. All right, something that we seen a glimpse of, or our elders and apostles seen a glimpse of in 2011. All right, when that whole thing happened. All right, one of the first, people they turned to and looked to, to accuse was the prophets for the testimony that they carry. Okay, and we're entering into the very same times now. All right. Well, the accuser of our brethren is getting ready to ramp up his accusation, but at the end of the day, the accusation isn't going to work. All right, because it says here that the accuser of our brethren is cast down. All right, so prophecy lets us know that the accuser of our brethren isn't going to prevail. Okay, at the end of the day, the accuser is going to fail in his accusations, because just like in the time of Yahushua, when he went before Pontius, all right, Pilate, all right, he had nothing he could say against him. You know, Pontius had nothing he could say against Yahushua because he was blameless. All right, and Yahushua kept the ministry blameless. He kept himself blameless, which is something that we've learned to do through the Spirit as well, to keep the ministry and ourselves blameless, so that in the time when we are possibly brought before magistrates and judges, really the only thing that they can say against us is that we prophesied, we went to work, and we went home. And we fellowship with brothers, and we did videos, and we prophesied. And we did videos, and we prophesied. And we did videos, and we went out to camp, and we went home. That's the only accusation that they can make at the end of the day. You know? And also, you know, the elect have already been justified, man. You know, like we've been saying, through the Spirit. That's why it's nothing to even worry about, man. It's really not anything to worry about. This is Romans 8 and verse 30. It says, and this is where we were praying for the Spirit to kick in, because the flesh, when met with opposition, you know, when met with accusations, naturally is going to be in a fearful state. It's naturally going to be in an uncomfortable state. But the beauty behind what the Lord has called us into now is the fact that we are exercising and practicing faith now, so that it's our first nature when hard times come. Okay, we're constantly put through hard times and times of uncomfortability to exercise our senses and our skill of faith, you know, the gift of faith, so that in these times, really it's second, you know, it's first nature. All right, to call upon the Lord, to wait upon that answer, really to lean on the Lord, whether it be in life or death. All right. But it says, moreover, whom he did predestinate, them he also called. And whom he called, them he also justified. And whom he justified, them he also glorified. So not only have the elect already been justified, but they've also been prophesied or preordained to be glorified alongside Yahushua. So the victory has already been gotten over the accuser. So all of these moves that he's making right now, all these developments, software developments, tools, and legislation that he's starting to move with, really doesn't matter on the grand scheme of things. Because at the end of the day, at the end of all this bullshit, the elect have already been justified and preordained and predestined to be glorified. So call Allah Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, man. All right, the victory has already been written and etched into reality. All we got to do is play it out, and Lord willing, we receive the Spirit to overcome and endure in these latter days. But with that being said, that's all I have, Lord. When this is edifying unto you elect, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahashim Yahushai Bahashim Ruchakodash, and double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well. Shalom. Stay up.